this border security perimeter deal that they're working on, what do you think about the fact every time you raise it in the House of Commons, they talk about media speculation? They talk to you about it.
Well, you know, it would be laughable, or farcical, if it wasn't so serious. What we're talking about here is Canada's sovereignty. We're talking about Canadians' privacy. And this government doesn't want to talk about it all. And even, you know, as I said in the question period, even this government should be concerned about privacy, and they make no bones about, oh, we have to have integrated economies and all the rest of it. And some of us have some concerns about whether they're doing that. But when it comes to Canadians' privacy and when it comes to Canada's sovereignty, that needs to be debated in the House of Commons. And they need to tell us what the plan is. And to just say, oh, there's nothing here, move along, is frankly ridiculous.
If you fear they're playing for time so that after you guys break, then that's when they learn about it?
If I had more time on my question, I would have said, when is this deal going to be signed off? What's in the deal? I asked that and, you know, fluffed off as usual. But, you know, when are they going to sit down and, you know, dot the I's and cross the T's and sign the agreement? We're hearing that might be done before Parliament comes back. And so, you know, this is, we've seen this before. We had it with the previous government. It was the Security Prosperity Partnership. It was done behind closed doors. There was no option for Canadians to get in on the debate. I thought we were past that. I thought we were going to actually have a debate and have accountability. And with this government, it's actually behind closed doors. And if you ask anything about it, they accuse you of some, you know, conspiratorial theory that actually doesn't exist. What exists is them putting forward a plan that we've heard about and them denying that it exists, and that's reprehensible. And we need to actually have this shine some daylight on this. And if it's a deal that's going to be going forward, why wouldn't Parliament be seized with this? Thank you.
One of the issues we may hear more about, we will hear more about in the new year, is this idea of a trade and security perimeter deal with the United States. Negotiations underway. We may get the deal, some are suggesting, in January. What concerns you about a security and trade perimeter deal with the Americans?
Well, first, it should be debated in Parliament. Stephen Harper used to believe that kind of thing. He used to say that, and when he was heading up reform and that whole movement, that a democratic debate about important issues like that was important. He now prefers to do things behind closed doors, and the so-called transparency that he always talked about, that's as opaque as you can get. But look, if we can find an easier way to move people and goods across that border, that could be very good for Canada. But we've got to take a look at what is being given up. Are we giving up our sovereignty, our opportunity to make decisions about what's in the best interests of Canada and the Canadian people? And we don't want to merge with the United States here on a kind of step-by-step basis behind closed doors. Nobody wants to see that.
So if I'm hearing you correct, you're not opposed in principle to the idea of negotiating some sort of security and trade deal with the Americans, or are you?
No, we're not. If it means that we can move goods and people back and forth across the border easier, because right now it's very difficult post 9/11, and it's hurting our economy, then let's work towards that. But let's not give up our right to make decisions about who comes to become a Canadian, for example, or how our monetary and fiscal policies operate. I mean, we can't start giving up the levers of what it means to be a nation called Canada, and that's, I guess, what our worry is. There's been attempts at this in the past, and we're concerned that could be going on right now.
I assume that, generally speaking, Liberals think it's a good idea to get trade flowing over the border.
Everybody does. We're all concerned about the thickening of the border. The issue is, frankly, the secrecy with which this is being done. Why would we have a whole process apparently leading to some kind of an agreement with a whole media rollout being proposed by the government, and we're in the dark. No one's opposed to making sure that we're in this crazy situation in Canada where travel is easier between Germany and France than it is between Canada and the United States. When you consider the history of the 20th century, that's a rather ironic statement. So I think we should be moving to do that, but to provide greater cooperation. That's not the issue. The issue is how this government manages these affairs in Canada.
Is there any things you listed out? You rattled off a list, series of areas you're concerned about, immigration, etc. Are there any
No,
areas
my concern.
are there any areas that would be off the table?
No, I think we have to. I think we have to look and see what it is the government is proposing. The problem we have right now is we don't have any information. The government says it's speculation. We do have a lot of quite well-founded information being provided to us that says this, in fact, is being considered. And obviously, the government wouldn't be spinning its information to some selective reporters unless it was in fact planning to do something. So we have an obligation to ask about it. And I think that the challenge for us is that we simply don't know exactly what it is the government is contemplating doing or signing. And I think that's what we're entitled to know as a House of Commons.
Now, I happen to be a very, very strong believer in increasing the pace of North American economic integration, especially in view of the development of regional economic blocs in other parts of the world. The European Union, even African countries are starting to pull together as regional economic blocs. You're seeing the ASEAN-China grouping. There is an economy of scale and an opportunity in regional blocs. And I do believe that North America, Mexico, Canada, United States, do have complementarities and economies of scale that they can use effectively in global competition with manufacturers, exporters from other parts of the world. I think North American integration can proceed on a trade-related basis trilaterally, but I do believe that border security management best proceed on a bilateral basis with overlaps on best practices. There are best practices that one can apply from one to the other partner for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
The thought of putting a perimeter around North America has always been one that is neuralgic, certainly among our politicians, but it's surely in the making. I think the only question is really where do you draw the southern border of that security perimeter? And I'll come back to that at some point. But anyway, I think the real point is that the Smart Border Accord post 9/11 is really just the latest step toward the construction of a security perimeter, and one that is marching forward, you might say, with the inevitability of a Greek, I'll say, drama, not tragedy. You know, you would say that this long march started as far back as the enunciation of the Monroe Doctrine in 1823. Teddy Roosevelt issued the what's called the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine in 1904, which justified American police power throughout the hemisphere to deal with unrest or wrongdoing. And I think you could also argue that George W. Bush's national security strategy in 2002, which really deals with preemptive action, among other things, is simply an extension of the Roosevelt Corollary. And I'd leave it to the philosophers and the grammarians, perhaps, to let me know whether you can have a corollary within a corollary. Anyway, if you go further, Canada gets into the act a little bit because all these other pronouncements were unilateral American ones. In 1938, another Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, gave an assurance to Mackenzie King, our Prime Minister, that an attack on Canada would be considered an attack to the States. And this, of course, was formalized 2 years later in what's called the Ogdensburg Declaration. And from then on, you go on to the North Atlantic Treaty. Article 5 says an attack on one is an attack on all within NATO. And then you have the agreement we have with the United States through NORAD, which came about in 1958. So, you know, I think step by step we're really creating a kind of fortress North America simply by installments. And if one accepts, as I certainly do, and I think Michael Kurgan does as well, that we're very unlikely to disengage from the North American economic integration business, maybe this is no bad thing. If I can open just one parenthesis, I had spoke to the Council of Chief Executives of Canada just after 9/11. I was walking back to my office in Toronto, and with one of the chairman of one of the big five banks, and he said, "Gee, that was really interesting what you said, Reid, but of course it could never happen here." So, you know, the feeling of the business community, which is one of complacency. And one of your conference organizers, the distinguished Professor Wark, has taken a hack at at one of my successors as director of the service that we shouldn't be complaining about Canadian complacency. Well, I think we should be complaining about complacency, and I applaud Dick Fadden for getting up there and saying it pretty plainly and directly. NAFTA is a trade-based treaty, and it may or may not evolve into something else over the years. At the moment, it seems to have worked pretty well for the purposes that it has. But it created a kind of partnership that we had never seen before in Canada, this trilateral arrangement. And the first time, frankly, that the partnership, even if not enshrined in the treaty, is put to the test, which is in designing a security perimeter, we shuffle the Mexicans off the field. I'm not trying to tell you this morning that talking to and negotiating with the Mexicans along with the Americans is going to make things is going to be awkward. Of course it's going to be awkward. What I would say to you this morning, however, that it's not impossible. There's all sorts of models for multilateral asymmetrical negotiations, including some very successful ones under the World Trade Organization's predecessor, the GATT, and we should use them. I think not to do so flies in the face of the partnership we have sought to forge in North America. And more specifically, I think we should take the practices where other people have melded very disparate cultures and societies and difficulties, such as the European Union's Schengen Agreement, which protects the EU perimeter but permits a free flow of people and goods across its internal borders. Now, I mean, obviously this would mean in North America that you would have American, Canadian, and for that matter, Mexican teams at key frontier points in all three countries, and the interoperable communications and data bank availabilities that we've heard about this morning.
The second specific issue I wanted to mention was the continued integration of the North American economy. Certainly here, after those September 11th attacks, we had a lot of work to do to make sure that the U.S.-Canada border was open for business, open for tourism, while closed down to the terrorists and others who seek to break the law. There's very clear instructions from Prime Minister Creighton and President Bush, and great leadership by John Manley and Tom Ridge. We put that Smart Border Action Plan together. We've implemented it. We've put more people and much more technology at the border. We've got the fast lanes for the trucks as well as for the passenger vehicles. I read recently we now have over 100,000 members in the Nexus program for passenger vehicles. We put in place integrated border enforcement teams. This was very important. These are law enforcement and intelligence agencies from every level of government, from both sides of the border, working in teams, using good intelligence and good law enforcement to stop terrorists, to stop the drug pushers and anyone else who seeks to break the law even before they get to the border.
So, you know, I think step by step we're really creating a kind of fortress North America simply by installments.
But we've got to take a look at what is being given up. Are we giving up our sovereignty, our opportunity to make decisions about what's in the best interests of Canada and the Canadian people? And we don't want to merge with the United States here on a kind of step-by-step basis.
What we're talking about here is Canada's sovereignty. We're talking about Canadians' privacy, and this government doesn't want to talk about it all.
The government says it's speculation. We do have a lot of quite well-founded information being provided to us that says this, in fact, is being considered. And obviously the government wouldn't be spinning its information to some selective reporters unless it was, in fact, planning to do something.